refer to Marianne Wolf's work on Reader Come Home. Will the next generation, she asks, adept at multitasking and quick access to multiple sources of knowledge, fail to fully develop their own deep reading processes and be more exposed to false information? So we've been speaking about the writing. Let's now look at the reading. So in light of this, in your own research, does this prospect give us cause for concern going forward?
Right from the outset, using internet technology and hypertext links and, which offered the opportunity for the reader to click and go off task and be distracted. That's one issue. The other issue is that, and this is the whole Nick Carr's book, and he was the editor of Word magazine, which was the de facto, I suppose, popular press, computer-oriented, serious research, but also popular items. So he unplugged himself for 6 months to write The Shadows, and he was citing research even back then that the way we read on screen is we just skim. We don't read deeply. Sure. We don't reflect. We don't annotate. We don't underline. We can do that, but we don't do it. Research done certainly at third level would indicate that those who read, and even beyond that, back down to this research in France and in Norway as well, that demonstrates that reading from a paper medium is much more preferable by many students than reading from screen, and that they perform better in terms of assessment of their learning outcomes.
Sure.
Now, quite aside from the other issues with the physiological side of screen reading, it's the whole skimming over of things, and introduce, whenever I meet practitioners, and when I say about practitioners here now in the financial industry and the legal industry, and I used on a regular basis internationally engaged them, I'd always ask them how they found their intake of graduates and undergraduate students. And the global head of legal services in one of the big four, whom I met just 2 years ago, answered that question quite, lawyers have to read deeply. They must, but the devil is in the detail in legal contracts and regulations. And he had two reasons in terms of his hiring practice. He found that females, for example, female lawyers were much more attentive to detail and managed to stay on task much better than their male counterparts, who are more easily distracted by their online activities and experience, and because his clients depended on very accurate assessments and policy documents.
Sure.
80% of his hires, of his staff, were female. Now, so what that indicates to me, is that people have been affected by digital technologies, that males are perhaps more prone because they're more easily distracted. And maybe that's a function of our biological history in the way we developed. Because being distracted was very important in survival context. To be able to stay on task while hunting is important, but you also needed to capture other signals. And, like a snake hanging from a tree that you might walk into and you get bitten and you're dead. Mm-hmm. Or maybe, a predator or another hunter from an opposing tribe or whatever. You need to be attentive to all details. So what has our prehistoric or historical brain, or the brain as it evolved, right, evolved for a totally different set of scenarios, right? So, you know, when you're on screen and reading on screen, it's fine. Like in my computer-based training days, you could only run one application at a time. There was no emails, there was no instant messages, there was none of this distraction, right? And the other thing that people don't realize with the human brain, and it's why primary kids, and I was a terror for it when I was in primary school, with daydreaming, right? Our brains have evolved, they're energy intensive, right? They consume 20% of the energy in our body, right? So we are wired to switch into a wandering mode as much as we can in order to avoid concentration and using those important calories.
That's the system 1 and system 2.
System 1 and system 2. Yeah. So the thing is, these digital technologies, and neuroscientists know this, right? Are not only are they addictive in terms of mind wandering and straight going off task, but all of that impacts our ability to read and stay on task, right?
Yeah.
Because we're offered with very easy opportunities for screen swapping and checking. And
distractibility right? Kicks in.
Yeah.
And in terms of skimming in education, what are your observations, Simon? Myself, as a mother of 20-somethings, who say, don't get too deep into that. People only skim. My age group only skim. They do 3 or 4 lines. Do you see that emerging among the seniors in your primary school, for instance?
Yeah, I don't know. We actually teach skimming as a reading skill at primary level. So maybe we need to reverse there in the education system. I mean, I would definitely be guilty of skimming personally when there's a long document. I mean, I suppose it depends on the document, reading for purpose and all that kind of stuff, of what skill you use to do it. But yeah, I mean, I think technology has transformed the way we read anyway, particularly with hyperlink things. Do you know that you are traditionally reading was, you start at the start and you go to the end and you might be flicking pages maybe, and it took a long time, whereas reading in a way it's quite different. I mean, it's quite acceptable to hop from one place to the other, but what you're pulling in is probably, I mean, evidently couldn't be as deep as if you're distraction free. And I think it's the distractions and the ease of distractions that make more difficult. I mean, I think people who have Kindles seem to be able to read fairly all right, because there's nothing, you can't flick over, hit Alt Tab and find yourself, or there's no little red button, little things on the notifications showing up saying, oh, by the way, look at me now, look at me. There isn't as many opportunities. I mean, I think there's some technologies being developed that are trying to create that, maybe artificially, I don't know, this distraction-free idea.